Welcome to Inspired Change, a new inspirational and motivational broadcast that strives to empower men in a positive way, designed to educate, empower, and inspire even the busiest individual on the go over that first cup of coffee. Please join me in welcoming Gunter, international psychologist, author, speaker, and producer.
Hi, welcome everybody back to dealing with change and hopefully make it inspirational. So in the last podcast that I did, I essentially provided an overview about how to cope with Covid19, the coronavirus, and the changes that we've been forced to adapt to. In this particular episode, I thought what I'd do is actually touch on something that I see as being really fundamentally important at the moment, and that is that although many people, and I'm really sad to have to say that, have been stood down or have lost their jobs, and potentially in some instances their livelihood, especially if they've been in small business, there's a large number of people who've been able, in fact, to work and continue to work but from home. Now, at first, working from home seems to be sort of generally an inviting idea, especially if you're spending, like a lot of us in Sydney, an hour to an hour and a half commuting from your home into your workplace. So, on the surface, you're gaining that time that normally you'd be spending in traffic, which is a positive thing, okay? So it's not all bad. There are some positives in that. But there are also some fairly significant challenges in setting yourself up to work from home. And so what I thought I'd do is share with you some ideas about how to be able to facilitate that to be less stressful and less disorientating. And remember that when we're stressed, and change represents stress, I'm going to keep repeating that message, and can in fact trigger anxieties, we tend to think more negatively, we tend to be more pessimistic, we tend to catastrophize things, and as a way of trying to cope is we often become much, much more rigid. None of those things are going to help, okay? And I'm going to spend some other time speaking specifically how to be emotionally a lot more nimble and a lot more regulated, because we're all going to need it. So, working from home, what are some of the challenges? Now, that sort of depends on your setup at home, okay? So, it's going to be different if you're living on your own, okay? And some people do. They have some people see it as a luxury of being the only occupant to their premise, and they don't have to share it. They might share it with a dog or a cat, but no real other human beings. And at the moment, I'm not going to focus on the downsides to that. Right now, I'm going to focus on, what's it like to work from home if you're a single person. The other part of it is a couple. How do you adjust and adapt to working at home as a couple? And thirdly, I'm going to talk about the biggie, and that is, what if you're a whole family and one or both of the adults in that family are going to have to work from home and trying to make the most of it, okay? So let me start off with being a single person, and I'm going to make the assumption that inherently you're going to be living in a unit. So for some, that might be a larger unit. For others, it might be very small. It could be a studio apartment. So the key thing that I'll come back to is when we are in a process of change, one of the things that helps carry us through is creating structure. Now, that's true for all of the types of working from home situations that we could find ourselves in. Structure helps support. So does routine. So one of the things that I would look at is, have I got somewhere that I can set up to actually work? Do I have the capacity to have a workstation? If you're in a small studio apartment, you're not really likely to have essentially a study or a second bedroom that you can set up. You're going to need to create a space, okay? And that space needs to be dedicated to your work. Now, if you're a couple, I'm going to expand this a little bit and talk about, okay, so how do we as a couple, how can we generate a structure? So the first thing that I talk about is being able to sit down together and begin to look at how well we collaborate and cooperate. A lot of couples are about to spend or have been spending a significant greater amount of time together in the same space for long periods of time. Now, some people might go, yes, that's fantastic, love it, looking forward to it. Other people might find that a bit more challenging. And again, part of it comes down to your sort of personality type. Some of it comes down to the, how do you as a couple work together or not? So the pitfalls are that not having a structure, not having set up some routines, not being open and transparent with each other is that we're going to run into conflict. So in order to avoid that, my suggestion is sit down with your partner and create a team meeting fundamentally. Okay, so let's keep it in the workspace so that both of us know what we're doing, when we're doing it, and when also we're going to have some downtime. One of the big things at the moment that I hear from lots of people is maintaining motivation. Okay, so let's take and look at structure if you're a family. Okay, so there's a couple of different points. If you've got very, very, very young children, one of the things that you're going to have is the need to be flexible around the child's needs. If they're a little bit older, we're going to have the issue about who's going to sit down and focus on the homeschooling. Can we do a tag team? So one of us works for a certain period of time, then takes over and we swap. So that the capacity to be nimble on our feet and adapt to different circumstances around the needs of the child is still going to be there, whilst I'm still also working on the needs for myself in regard to the job that I'm doing. Now again, if you're in a large house, my suggestion is that at least one of you have a place to set up permanently to work from. And hopefully you'll be able to do that with the other person. Keeping in mind that whilst one person's working, the other person maybe need to be involved with taking care of the kids, keeping the kids either entertained or involved in their own schooling or work activity, and so to keep that flowing. The other part to it is the issue about self-care. Again, if you're a single person, that's a lot easier. You can make your own and choose your own time when you're going to do that. When you're a couple, again, it needs that additional level of, do we do that downtime together, separately, or a mix? And so again, a lot of stuff about structure and routines. Kids like routines in the situation. So do we as adults. It's a really good way of de-stressing when we have routines. I don't need to think about stuff too much. So that's a little bit about structure and routine. So what's the next thing? Well, one of the things that I've been hearing a lot about from people is that they have been working long hours from home. There's a sense of, often for people, of guilt for not being at work. We're used to going to work, sitting down, doing our work, or getting involved in our workplace and working, and we have sort of a rhythm to that. When we're at home now, that whole context, that whole way of operating is completely changed. So one way that I see a lot of people compensating is they work extra long hours and they're over-focusing on work. Now, initially that might bump your productivity up, but the question is, are you going to be able to sustain that? Think about this. We don't know when this situation is going to end. Optimistically, we might go end of May, June, possibly July. Some of the politicians are talking about 6 months. Can you honestly say to yourself that I can keep up that intense pace for 6 months? I'm going to suggest to you that you won't be able to, that you're going to have a struggle with morale, job satisfaction, isolation, lack of motivation, lack of concentration. And again, if you're single, that's to a lesser degree, but if you're in a couple or in a family situation, the conflicting demands that come with being in a more communal setup is really going to take its toll. We are really going to need to, again, be emotionally and behaviourally flexible to accommodate that. So, yes, productivity during this time is important, but so is flexibility, and part of that is to really pace yourself. So taking breaks becomes really, really important. Being clear about, can I delegate some of my work? Is it really, significantly important to finish it off today, or can it wait a couple of days? How do I work effectively with my workload and workflow? Those two things are critically important. And so is taking breaks. Sometimes, we get to a point where we go, I just need to get up, move around. So there's all sorts of things that you can do. Sitting at a computer, and that's what most of us working from home are going to be doing. You need to do what we used to call pause gymnastics. You need to get your muscles loose, your joints moving. You need to stand up. And thankfully, one of the things that I rely on a lot in that context is my Apple Watch, which basically prompts me to get up on my feet, stand, and then also being conscious about getting my movement in for the day. So the breaks are not just simply, going to the fridge, because that isn't going to help either. It's about a real balance between self-care, where we focus on exercise, nutrition, but also really importantly and if I could get everybody in this situation to do some really good relaxation exercises, like a combination of abdominal breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, some visualization, some mindfulness exercises, that becomes an important part of the routine of coping with social isolation. It's a bit like, I was looking at the internet the other day, and there was some tips from an astronaut on the International Space Station. And I thought, that is a really good way of looking at this. A lot of us are actually in our own little space station. It's just that we're not orbiting anywhere. We're sort of stuck. We don't get the change of view necessarily. You're lucky if you're in a house or in an apartment that has a view, but some of us are not. So the importance, I can't stress the importance of taking breaks. It's really, really important. Now, amongst that all is the balance between contact with work colleagues and customers, stakeholders, clients, and we have lots and lots of really good platforms to do that with. But we need to also balance that out with having some, time contacting family, friends, and others. It might be checking in with your personal trainer. You can't train together at the moment, but he's put together a program for you to do at home. Can you use something like FaceTime, Zoom to touch base, run through some things, and then be able to go back to doing that yourself? So these things are critically important in my view. Now, let's talk about couples and families. One of the things that's going to really come up, apart from dealing with the frustration sometimes that technology can present, is how do we deal with each other and our differences in temperament and communication style. Now, when we're under stress, we have a tendency to either get a little bit more, aggressive sometimes, or, some people try to explain it as being assertive, but often it's quite aggressive, or we tend to withdraw into ourselves. Now, at some point, it's going to light the fuse, and we are going to find ourselves getting into conflict. We need to talk about how we're going to deal with that. It's not that simple as just saying, oh, she'll be right. A lot of people have not thought about what they are going to do to deal with the interpersonal relationship at home. And that's with our partner, and it's, with our kids. And if you happen to be there with your pet, your dog, they're probably therapeutic but we need to deal with each other as human beings. And so good communication and a good sort of idea about how we're going to deal with conflict. The more we're going to be socially isolated, the more frustrated we're going to get. And we're going to get into different sorts of feelings as well. So we need to be clear with each other. And the thing that I talk about a lot in a situation like this is the most important aspect in many respects is that we trust each other to have each other's back while we're stuck in this situation that's challenging. So, as the Gottmans talk about, trust is about a number of things. It's about being open and honest. So, transparency is important. Don't internalize stuff. If you're upset, annoyed, put it on the table in a respectful way and negotiate with the person that you've got the particular issue with, whether that's your partner or it's your kids. So the upside is that we can really turbocharge our relationships to really move into a new level where we're literally so much more attuned with each other. And it's not just in the workspace, it's also in the personal space. So we're getting in a way to know each other from a perspective that we don't necessarily have had before. Now, some couples have been used to working together because they run a small business together. But the difference is, usually we can get away from each other for a period of time. When we're socially isolated at home and we're working from home, that's not necessarily the case. So, we really can take this opportunity to focus on our leadership skills, i.e. what's my vision about working from home, what's my expectation, the sort of important aspects of my relationship and the way that I communicate is going to be also fundamentally important. And it's going to be based on each person taking care of their part of problems, but also their part of the solutions. So it's a mutual thing. It's dynamic. We both don't blame. We take, ownership for my part in whatever it is that's going on. So if I'm not clear about communicating, then I need to get clearer. If I tend to be blaming, let me stop blaming and just open the conversation up so that we can explore things from different perspectives. So there's some of the sort of really fundamental tips that I want to drop into this conversation at the moment. But think about what else might be really, really relevant for you. I know one of the things that not a lot of people are talking about, but I think is really, really important, is the sense of grief and loss that a lot of us are going through. I know from my personal journey that one of the big things that I'm missing at the moment is actual physical contact with my kids, who are adults and parents, and my grandchildren, and the whole family being able to come together. We've had to, for various reasons, socially isolate. So, we can do FaceTime, we can do Zoom, we can use different types of apps, and we can be flexible in how we do all of that, but it's not the same as physical contact. And I think that's the big, big issue at the moment, is that lack of it. And on a day-to-day basis, we need to keep reminding ourselves that there was a beginning and there will be an end to this. And we just have to get through to the other end. The optimistic thing is that this could teach us to be different in a really constructive way. Being more present in the moment. Don't just rely on electronics and on technology to help you live through this. Living through this means being able to generate that flexibility to adapt to each other that's going to draw us together in a loving, in a respectful, in a cooperative and kind way. And we can be so much more than sometimes we think we can when we're completely on our own. And if you happen to be working from home on your own, see about making that contact. See about really reflecting into yourself about how you can be a better person. How you as a male, and I talk about making good men great. How can you move from good to great? Sometimes you have to accept that we're going to be simply going from so-so to good and then to great. But it's some focus for us for our future living, for our future being. And it's not all about doing the work that we're expected to do from the office, but it's about being within our relationships, within our community, within our culture, within our workplace. So the challenge is, see what you can do. Remember, self-awareness, flexibility, adaptability leads to resilience. And until the next time, I'm signing off. Take care. Stay healthy. Stay well.
Thank you, Gunter, and thank you to our listeners. Inspired Change with Gunter Swoboda. Please join us every Wednesday for a new broadcast by visiting www.spreaker.com/show/inspire-change, which will feature all the ways you can listen. If you have comments or suggestions, email producer@studio3hollywood.net. Thank you and have an inspiring day.